Before we begin soldering, please check if you have all components. So first of all, you should have a little piece of paper that shows you all the important parts for the soldering process. Most importantly, the PCB itself. A ATtiny 85, that's this little thing with the 8 legs. A RGB LED. An infrared receiver. An infrared sender diode. A little push button. The on and off switch. A single 100 ohm resistor. And 3 470 ohm resistors. And then 2 battery holders. It doesn't really matter which components you start with. It's just important to keep an eye on the instruction list to see which components go on which side of the PCB. So in my case, I'm going to start soldering the infrared receiver LED first, because I think that is one of the easiest parts to solder. Take the infrared receiver and you put it in like this. Then you bend it up. This step is important so that the receiver is placed properly and can receive infrared signals from other badges. Now, with the soldering iron heated up, the component in place, and everything is ready to go. You place the soldering iron on the first pin and you add solder. You repeat that process for all 3 pins until they look properly connected. You cut off the legs. Now we can solder on the infrared sender LED. So here we have to look out for the legs. One is longer than the other. The longer leg is plus. And on the back side of the PCB, we can see one pin is labeled plus and the other pin is labeled minus. So we have to put the LED in the way that the long leg goes through the hole labeled with plus. It's very important to place the LED up front, because otherwise you won't be able to send signals to other badges properly. Same procedure, you heat up your soldering iron, put it on the pad and add solder. Then you cut off the legs. Now I will solder on the RGB LED. This one is a bit more tricky for 2 reasons. First, you also have to place it in the right way. The longest leg must go where the longest line is drawn on the back side. So if you have the LED plugged in, make sure that the longest leg represents the longest line on the silk screen of the backside of the PCB. It's very important. If you solder this one on the wrong way, the LED won't work and your badge won't be able to show the nice colors that we programmed in. And then same procedure. Soldering iron on the pad, add solder. Don't add too much solder. The pads are very close together and solder bridges are created easily because of that. So make sure your soldering iron is clean and solder on the pins in the corners first. Again, if all pins are soldered on, cut off the legs. Now all important parts that we need for the front side of the PCB have been soldered. So the parts I'm going to solder now can be placed on the front or the back side, it doesn't matter. So the next thing I'm going to solder on is this little button that we need to press in order to send the signals to other badges. And you can place this on the back side like this, but you can also put it on the front side like this. It's just important that it's in the right place. I like to keep it in the front, so I'm going to solder it there. Now I'm going to solder the 100 ohm resistor for our IR send LED. And I'm going to take it off that little paper ends and bend it like this. And put it where it says 100 R1, just below IR send, on the back side of the PCB. Again, this part can be put on the front side, but in order to preserve as much of the artwork that we have done, I'm going to put it on the back side. Now the three 470 ohm resistors that we need for the RGB LED. We remove the paper ends, we bend the resistor and put it in one of the places labeled 470. That is R3, R2 and R4. Okay, with the resistors in place, I'm going to solder on the on and off switch next. This again can be placed on the back side as well as the front side of the PCB. Now I'm going to solder on the battery connectors. The battery connectors are very easy to solder on. The only thing you have to look out for is which side is plus and which side is minus. On the PCB you can see there's a little plus on one side and these lines on the other side. The lines indicate the little spring that is also in the battery holder itself. So they should be placed like this. Turn the PCB to the other side. Again, you can bend the pins a little bit so everything keeps in place. And now you just solder it on. Cutting off these legs might be a bit harder than the other ones. Before we go on and solder on the ATtiny, make sure all the other connections are soldered properly and have connection. You can also just plug it in without soldering. Get the batteries, plug them in, and see if your batch is turning on. Maybe you have to hold the ATtiny in place a bit because the connection is not proper. But now you can see whether or not everything is working. You should see it flash a little bit when you press the button. So turn it off again, possibly remove the batteries. Now with the ATtiny in place, just turn around the PCB and solder the last pins on like we did before. When you soldered everything, put in some batteries, turn on the switch, and there you go. This is your batch. I hope this video helped you solder your own bill. We wish you a lot of fun with our game and a nice congress.